My father didn't yell. That's what made it worse. He smiled, lifted his glass, and said casually. So, are you still useless, or did something finally change? The table went quiet. Not shocked quiet. Comfortable quiet. My mother kept eating. My sister didn't look up. No one said my name. No one corrected him. I felt something settle in my chest then. Not pain. Not anger. Understanding. This wasn't a bad moment. This was how they truly saw me. And I finally understood what staying calm could do. Sunday dinners at my parents' house always looked peaceful from the outside. Clean tablecloth. Warm lights. Plates arranged just right. The kind of house where neighbors assumed everything was fine. I arrived on time. I always did. Being late felt like another thing they'd quietly count against me. My father sat at the head of the table, posture straight, sleeves rolled just enough to show authority. My mother moved between the kitchen and the table, correcting tiny details that didn't matter. My sister scrolled on her phone, already checked out, already superior. No one asked how my week was. They never really did. Dinner started with small talk that wasn't meant for me. Work gossip from my father. A friend's engagement from my sister. My mother nodding, approving, keeping score. When the conversation finally turned toward me, it wasn't sudden. It never was. So, my father said, cutting his food carefully, "What's next for you?" Not "how are you?" Not "are you okay?" Just outcomes. "I'm figuring things out," I said. My voice sounded calm. Practiced. My mother smiled politely. That same smile she used with distant relatives. "You've been figuring things out for a while," she replied. No edge. No cruelty. Just a statement, delivered like a fact. My sister glanced up and smiled, barely. A quick look that said she was glad the attention wasn't on her. My father leaned back. He didn't look at me when he spoke. At some point, he said, "You have to admit when something isn't working." The room stayed still. Forks paused. Glasses rested midair. I waited for someone to soften it. For my mother to redirect. For my sister to joke. Nothing came. I nodded once. "I know." That seemed to surprise them. They were used to me explaining. Defending. Shrinking. My father continued, encouraged by the silence. "Some people just don't have drive. And that's okay. But pretending otherwise doesn't help anyone." My mother finally looked at me. Her eyes weren't angry. They were resigned. That hurt more. I focused on my plate. On chewing slowly. On not reacting. No one raised their voice. No one insulted me outright. And yet, everything was clear. I wasn't disappointing them anymore. I had already failed in their eyes. They'd moved on. As dinner continued, they spoke around me, not to me. Plans. Vacations. Other people's successes. I became background noise in my own family. And sitting there, invisible but fully awake, I made a quiet decision. I would stop correcting their version of me. I would let it stand. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of what they said. But because of how normal it felt. I lay in bed replaying the dinner, not searching for insults, but for pauses. Moments where someone could have stopped it. Moments where they chose not to. My father's tone stayed calm in my head. That was the part that lingered. If he had shouted, I could have blamed anger. If he had mocked me openly, I could have blamed cruelty. But he spoke like a man stating weather conditions. As if my uselessness was already settled fact. Around 2 in the morning, I reached for my phone. Not to text anyone. I already knew no one would understand. Instead, I scrolled through old emails. Job rejections. Half-finished conversations. Messages that ended with, "Let's circle back." I noticed something strange. None of them sounded desperate. None of them sounded careless either. Just, unfinished. I realized my parents didn't know this version of me at all. They only knew the pauses. The gaps. And they had filled those gaps with their own conclusions. Over the next few weeks, I pulled back. Not dramatically. I didn't announce anything. I simply stopped offering explanations. When my mother called, I answered politely, briefly. When she asked what I was doing, I said, working on a few things. No details. No hope in my voice. She seemed relieved by that. It confirmed what she already believed. At work, something similar happened. People assumed I was replaceable. Quiet. Agreeable. Temporary. I noticed how often my ideas were repeated by someone else and suddenly sounded smarter. How deadlines were discussed without my input. How my name disappeared from email threads. And yet, no one worried about me. Because I didn't complain. I didn't push. That made me invisible. But invisibility had an advantage. I started listening more than speaking. Watching how decisions were actually made. Who held power? Who borrowed it? I noticed how often people underestimated calm. They confused silence with weakness. One afternoon, my father forwarded me a job listing. Entry level. Poorly paid. Thought this might suit you, he wrote. I stared at the message longer than I expected. Not because it hurt. But because it confirmed something. They had already adjusted their expectations downward. Way downward. I didn't reply right away. When I finally did, I wrote. Thanks. I'll take a look. Nothing more. That night, I opened a folder on my laptop. One I had been adding to quietly for months. Notes. Timelines. Contacts. Not plans for revenge. Just records. Patterns I hadn't named before. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger required energy. This felt different. Like stepping back far enough to finally see the whole picture. For the first time, I realized something unsettling. I wasn't behind. I was simply no longer playing the role they had written for me. And they hadn't noticed yet. I didn't change anything all at once. That's the part people misunderstand when they imagine revenge. They expect movement. Noise. Intent. What I did looked like stagnation. I kept showing up the same way. Polite. Quiet. Non-committal. When my mother asked if I had applied to the job my father sent, I said, I'm considering a few options. She nodded, satisfied. In her mind, that meant nothing was happening. At work, I let others speak first. I watched who took credit, who deferred, who panicked when decisions were delayed. And slowly, something interesting happened. People started relying on me without realizing it. Not publicly. Not formally. Just in small, untraceable ways. A spreadsheet no one else wanted to maintain. A system everyone complained about but never fixed. A client no one liked dealing with because they asked too many questions. I took those things on quietly. I didn't announce improvements. I didn't chase praise. I let the systems do the talking. Weeks passed. Then months. My parents stopped asking about my future altogether. That should have hurt. Instead, it freed me. Because when no one is watching, expectations disappear. Then my sister lost her job. It came up at dinner, casually, like everything else. Budget cuts. Bad timing. My parents leaned in. Concerned. Engaged. They asked questions. They offered help. I noticed how quickly the tone shifted. My sister complained loudly about how unfair it was. How her company didn't appreciate her. I stayed quiet. My father glanced at me and said, almost as an afterthought. See? Even successful people can stumble. It wasn't meant kindly. It was meant as a warning. I nodded. Around that same time, my manager called me into a meeting. No build-up. No warning. He closed the door and said, I need to ask you something. I waited. Do you realize how much of our workflow depends on you now? The question caught me off guard. Not because I didn't know, but because no one had ever said it out loud. He continued. If you left tomorrow, we'd have a problem. I didn't smile. I didn't respond immediately. I simply said. I hadn't thought about it that way. That wasn't entirely true. I had. Just not in terms of leverage. From that day on, people spoke differently around me. Carefully. Respectfully. Not because I demanded it. Because systems don't lie. At home, nothing changed. My father still talked at me. My mother still avoided specifics. My sister still assumed I was behind her. And that was the most shocking part. The more solid my position became elsewhere, the more invisible I remained to them. They were still measuring me using an old version. One that no longer existed. And I realized then, with absolute certainty, that I didn't need to correct them. Time was already doing it for me. The moment everything shifted didn't arrive with an argument. It arrived as an invitation. My company was hosting a small industry dinner. Nothing flashy. Just partners, managers, a few long-term clients. My manager asked if I could attend. Not to help. To be introduced. I didn't tell my parents. There was no reason to. The night of the dinner, I posted a single photo online. Nothing dramatic. Just a table setting, a name card, my title printed neatly beneath my name. I forgot about it almost immediately. Until the next morning. My mother called earlier than usual. Her voice sounded careful. Almost unfamiliar. I saw your picture, she said. What exactly do you do there? The question landed softly, but it carried weight. I answered honestly. Simply. Without trying to impress her. There was a pause. Oh, she said. I didn't realize. That sentence followed me for days. Not because it felt like an apology. It wasn't. It was recognition, arriving late. A week later, my father asked if we could have dinner again. Just the family. I agreed. This time, the table felt different. The same plates. The same food. But my father asked questions instead of making statements. My mother listened longer. My sister spoke less. No one mentioned the word useless. No one mentioned the past. They didn't need to. They had already revised the story in their heads. What surprised me most wasn't their change in behavior. It was how little it mattered to me. I answered their questions calmly. I shared what I wanted to share. I left early. There was no satisfaction in watching them adjust. No thrill. Just distance. I understood then that the real shift hadn't happened at that table. It had happened months earlier. The night I stopped needing their approval to move forward. They still see me differently now. More carefully. More respectfully. But the truth is, their opinion stopped shaping me long before that dinner. I finished my meal. Thanked them. And walked out into the quiet evening. Calm doesn't announce revenge. It lets the world catch up on its own.